Hey guys, it's Alex, and I'm here with a somewhat fun video today. What's more fun than unpopular opinions? I created a list earlier this month of 9 popular books that I don't actually like. And I figured I'd share that list with y'all because, honestly, spreading a little hate can be fun, especially when you find others who hate the same things you hate. I feel like the only thing that connects you closer than loving the same book is hating the same book, especially when it's an incredibly popular book. Standard disclaimer, if you like any of these books, that's fine. I'm not judging you as a reader. You're allowed to have your own tastes that are separate from mine. I'm sure you hate plenty of books that I love as well. And second disclaimer, I haven't read most of these books for several years, so when I talk about them, don't take what I say as the honest-to-God truth, because it's what I remember and it may not be entirely accurate, but I remember it a certain way for a reason, so we're just gonna go with it. I also don't have a lot of these books, for obvious reasons, so I'm gonna have to get creative with my editing here, which is always fun. You guys know how much I love that. The first book on this list is a John Green book. We're starting big, and it's The Fault in Our Stars. And honestly, it kind of surprises me that this is the book on the list, because from what I see of people reading John Green, even if they're not huge John Green fans in general, The Fault in Our Stars tends to be their favorite. It tends to be the one most people connect with. But I read a couple of his other books, and I didn't dislike them. I thought they were kind of mediocre, but fine. The Fault in Our Stars, I disliked. I gave this book 2 stars. It was such a frustrating experience to read. I found the 2 main characters really annoying. They're really pretentious teenagers, and yes, teenagers can be incredibly pretentious, but it was just unpleasant to read about them. I didn't care about either of them. I didn't care about the ending. It was sort of miserable to follow them through their lives. Even though I felt bad for them having cancer, that didn't make me like them anymore as people or as characters. It was just an all-around irritating experience. I really don't see what people enjoy about that book. I feel like I've read many other books on cancer that touched me a lot more than that one. But also, I've never really meshed with John Green's writing style. I've never particularly enjoyed how he tells a story. So it's probably just a personal taste thing. The second book on this list is actually 2 books, but they're by the same author, so I just included them under the second point. And they are 1984 by George Orwell and Animal Farm, also by George Orwell. I read these books when I was in high school. Animal Farm I read for a class in, I believe, 9th grade or 10th grade. I'd have been about 15, 16 at the time. Hated it. Also didn't understand it, so I'm willing to put that up to I was too young. I should probably reread that at some point. 1984 I read on my own, by choice, a year or so later, because George Orwell is one that whenever you look up lists of classics to read, especially as a younger teenage reader, his books always come up pretty high. I read this, I think when I was a junior in high school, so about 17, and I hated it. It was easy to get through, fairly quick, but just a miserable reading experience. The society was bad, it was just dreary and unhappy, and it felt like nothing happened throughout this book. We knew everything was bad, and then everything just continued to be bad, and nothing ever changed. And I'm not someone who needs a happy ending. It wasn't that. It was that there was a status quo, and it kept the status quo throughout the book. Nothing ever really got to a point where there was a point. Maybe I was too young for this one as well. These 2 books are ones that I do want to reread at some point. Probably not Animal Farm for a while, because I still don't know that I would really understand that one very well. That one was definitely an entire lack of understanding. I didn't understand the metaphors for communism and the corruption. I just took it as a literal story about talking animals, which is probably not the best way to read it. This I'm more hesitant on that I will change my opinion, but I do feel like it's something that this kind of story, the way it is dreary, the way the government doesn't change and the society doesn't change, I think that might be something that I'm capable of enjoying more as an adult, but as it stands, this was a miserable book that I absolutely hated. The third book on this list is somewhat of an oddity, in that I've read it multiple times over the years. I don't understand it, It's not so much that I hate it, it's that it doesn't feel like a book to me. And I would love for someone in the comment section to explain this book. It is Weetzie Bat by Francesca Block. It's an older YA book. I had friends who read it. I had friends who absolutely loved it and said it was a life-changing book. They were amazed by it. It was something very special to them. And I've looked on Goodreads, and people have said very similar things on Goodreads, that they absolutely love this book, and this was the book that got them through middle school or got them through high school or saved their life. I've given it 1 star on 3 separate occasions. It's not that I hate the story. It's that I don't understand what the story is. I don't understand what there is within the book to love. There's something people connect with, but it's this oddball of a story. It doesn't feel like a book. It feels like this existential fanfic that went wrong somehow. I don't understand. I don't know what to say about this book. I read it in middle school. Didn't understand it. A lot of the references and a lot of the things it talked about were too old for me at the time because I was rather naive and young in middle school. Read it again in high school and actually understood the references this time, but I still didn't like it. I still didn't understand what the point of the story was. Read it again after college. I was like, maybe now I will finally get it. There is something to get because so many people have given it 5 stars on Goodreads. I don't get it. And if you look at the reviews on Goodreads, if you look at the ratings, I have never seen a book that has been so incredibly polarizing. Most of the ratings are either 5 stars or 1 star, and there is not much in between. Either people completely get this book and love it, or they just don't at all and give it 1 star. And I would love to understand what people see in it. What do they connect with? So like, if you connect with this book, please explain why in great detail, because I don't understand it. And that's a genuine question. I don't think this book is poorly written. I don't think the characters are poorly done. I just don't think it's a book. And I don't mean that as an insult. It just doesn't read like an actual book to me. And it leaves me very confused and unhappy every single time. Book number 4 is actually a series, and it's one that is quite popular right now, and that is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. I didn't like these books. I don't understand the hype behind them, and I didn't understand why people loved them so much and why I hated them so much. But I think it was Books with Naheed who said recently that they were like a rom-com, and I think that helped me understand it a little bit more. I don't often do well with humor in books, especially when it's more of like a rom-com silly type humor versus like a David Sedaris or Bill Bryson humor that I do understand and does translate well to writing for me. I just don't realize it. I take everything as very serious and straightforward, and if things are meant to be funny, it can go very much over my head. So maybe that's my issue with this book, but I also just felt like all of the characters were really annoying. I don't know if anyone else felt like this, but I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't like Peter, I didn't like Josh, I think his name was, I didn't like Margot or Kitty, and I especially didn't like Laura Jean. She was really, really annoying, and she seemed really young for her age. When I started the book, I genuinely thought it was middle grade because it read like a middle grade novel, until she said she was like 17. And I was a bit taken aback, like, I thought you were 13, what are you doing driving a car? Maybe I'm just bad at telling ages. I think that's something I have issue with, but it did feel like she acted incredibly immaturely. And I do interact with teenagers, not so much anymore, but a year or 2 ago I was a girls soccer coach at a high school, and I interacted with teenage girls on a daily basis, and they didn't feel nearly as young as Laura Jean felt to me. And the book on a whole I just found really annoying and really pointless, and just the series got more annoying and pointless as they went along. It just seemed like Jenny Han was inventing drama to continue the series and sell more books. I think I gave books 2 and 3 2 stars, and I think I gave the first one 3 stars, but to be perfectly honest, that was an incredibly generous rating from me, and I didn't like any of them. Next, we have the Millennium series by Stieg Larson and also David Lagerkrantz. They've both written books in this series. I've read them all, and I've dislike them all. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. I don't get the love for these books. I don't think they're well written. I don't like the writing style, but they are translated, so it's hard for me to judge how well Stieg Larson and David Lagercrantz write. I definitely did connect more with David Lagercrantz's writing style, but Stieg Larson just seemed like he included a lot of really unnecessary details, and he would include lists of things, long lists of groceries. Lisbeth would go to the store, and he'd make a point to mention how much everything was, what cards she paid with, and every single item that she bought. And it just seemed like this is not important to the story. This could be a 250-page book really easily and not lose anything other than these long, pointless lists. I also felt that the books were really sexist, and not in the intentional way that they were about violence against women. It was a more subtle sexism that felt like it was coming from Stieg Larsson. Every male character was either an evil woman hater who was a literal Nazi, a rapist, a murderer, what have you. They were just literally the scourge of the earth, or they were good people, and there was no in between. There was no casual sexism ever. Add to that the main character, Blomkvist, literally had sex with every major female character in the first 3 books who wasn't designated as a victim, and even some that were designated as victims. It was really uncomfortable to read, and I didn't care about any of the stories. They felt really convoluted. I don't understand the hype behind these books, but somebody out there likes them. 6 and 7 go together somewhat. I've talked about these on my channel quite recently even. The first is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I picked this one up when I was looking for The Princess Saves Herself in this one. I got this instead because a lot of people said it was basically like, if you like that one, you'll like this one. They're pretty much very similar. And I didn't hate it at first. At first it was fine. Like, the first section was pretty much vague feminism things about rape culture and men controlling women and stuff like that. That was just nice feminism things that I agree with. And then it sort of delved into her relationships and a lot about how she was in love with this guy and like she dated a bad guy before him, but now like everything was fine and fixed and she loved him, and it wound up feeling really young, really immature to me. Like, she lacked the life experience to write about what she was writing about, which isn't necessarily due to her age. I was only like 2 or 3 years older than her when I read this. It just felt really inexperienced. I really got annoyed reading about her relationships. I thought the first part was fine about the vague feminism. It was nothing really special to me, but I did enjoy the message overall, so that was sort of, you know, a plus. But the second and third parts, I think it was in 3 parts, just felt like this diatribe of a teenager who'd found love for the first time and thought that there would be nothing else in the world that would ever live up to this experience. And that just sort of rang a little false for me, and I felt a little bit too old to be, like, appreciating that. I gave this book 3 stars, but that's mostly just because I feel bad giving a poetry book 2 stars. I'm not a big poetry reader, so that might be why I didn't like this. But I gave it a shot, and And next is The Princess Saves Herself in this one. This was the one that I wanted to read, and I wound up ordering it and getting it a couple of weeks after I read Milk and Honey, I think. This I was still excited for after Milk and Honey. I was like, I read an excerpt from this and it seemed amazing. I read like the first 3 poems or something and I was like, yes, I want to read this. I want the story. And whereas with Milk and Honey, I can tell you what I didn't like about it, this book I just don't remember. I remember having the same final thoughts as Milk and Honey. It felt generic and bland and it didn't do anything for me, and I also gave it 3 stars for the same reason that I'm not a poetry reader, so rating it low made me feel bad. But I can't tell you anything specific about this book. General thoughts, I didn't like it, but I didn't, like, hate it. I just don't remember it, and I feel like that says even more. Book number 8 is a nonfiction book. It's an incredibly popular nonfiction book that I feel like a lot of people who don't even read nonfiction have read, and that's Wild by Cheryl Strayed. I don't get it. It felt like an incredibly self-centered woman writing about how she was incredibly unprepared for this trip in the woods. She kept making mistakes, and I just got so annoyed by her. I didn't find it inspiring. I didn't find her story wonderful, or it didn't touch me. It just seemed like an irritating woman doing something to focus completely on herself and screwing up the entire time and getting help from a lot of people, but not understanding how much they were helping her, kind of. A lot of what I had an issue with was mostly just her personality. She seemed like an unpleasant person to me. She seemed self-centered. She seemed really ignorant a lot of the times in things that she didn't need to be ignorant in. She could have studied. She could have prepared herself. She chose not to and took a huge risk. And it bothers me that she got celebrated for that. That book just made me really uncomfortable and really unhappy, and I wound up unhauling my copy. But hopefully someone else enjoys it. If you get something out of it, that's great. I'm glad it helps you, but for me, it really did nothing. And the final book on this list I've also talked about. I actually have an entire video of me hate vlogging this book from about 1.5 years ago. And that is Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. So many people on BookTube love this book. I'd heard great things, and I heard it had good anxiety rep, and it was a cute contemporary YA. And I do like cute contemporary YAs. I want to say that, like, I read a lot of them. I have a whole shelf of Sarah Dessen that I love. I love Sarah Zar. Like, I do like these books. I picked up this, and I was worried that the anxiety rep wasn't going to be very good, or that I thought it'd be a really bad representation of anxiety or harmful, and honestly, I didn't think that at all. I thought the anxiety representation was fine. There were a few things that I didn't necessarily love, but her anxiety was different from mine, so that's par for the course. What I had an issue with was, first of all, she keeps referring to this incident that caused all of her anxiety. But she never tells you what it is, and she goes out of her way to bring up this incident and then tell you that she's not going to tell you what it is. And the whole book is about her getting over her anxiety and, like, learning to cope and starting to heal. And the fact that we were never told what the event was, despite the fact that it was brought up and thrown in our face constantly, really bothered me, and I really hated that. Also, the mother in the book clearly had some kind of mental illness. The way she was reacting was not healthy. She was literally throwing computers out of windows, and it was treated as for laughs, while we were supposed to take Audrey's anxiety, Audrey's mental illness, seriously. And I couldn't deal with both of those. Like, how am I supposed to take this person's mental illness seriously when that person's mental illness is treated as a joke? It made me really uncomfortable. I really hated this book. I gave it 1 star, and I don't give out 1 stars very often. It was honestly a book that really bothered me, and I don't see what other people see in it. I don't understand that book. It just seems so awful to me. But again, I did say that I have trouble with humor in books, and that is a book that's supposed to be sort of rom-com type humor. I love it in movies, it's just in books it does go over my head, so maybe that does have something to do with it. Thank you guys for watching this somewhat ranty video about things that I hate. I like to talk about things that I hate sometimes, like get them off my chest, maybe talk with some other people who also hate them and just bask in our hatred together. It can be fun, but I do mean no offense if you like these books. That's absolutely fine. People have different tastes in reading, and 100% you should like what you like and don't feel bad for it just because someone else disagrees. Books are subjective, so it's all in the eye of the beholder. So talk to me in the comments and tell me how much I trashed your favorite book, or tell me that you also hate these books. I'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye!